Hey everybody, Chuck here. Wanted to reach out to you here on the one of the things I'd promised for this week, but I'm getting really behind here, is a video debrief for each team on how they performed in round one here. I'm still planning on doing it, but it's just been a busy week with new classes and grading and all sorts of other classes starting up, and that I'm just kind of falling behind here. So I'm still planning on doing a debrief for every single team. I've got a class from 7:30 to 11 tomorrow, and then my afternoon's free. And so I plan on getting back to doing these videos for each team. And then certainly I'll finish them up on Saturday. But I wanted to get something to everyone so you can still keep working on it and start fine tuning your decisions for the next round. And then when I get the videos to you, you'll be able to, do any kind of tweaking and that stuff. So want to help keep you rolling along here. So let me share the screen. I just randomly picked a team here. From before. So let me take you through how we assess this one. So you can see on the front here, the team went a little bit backwards here. I always like to start at the finance and try to get my arms around, what really happened here. So I'm going to go into finance. I'm going to go back to round one, and this is a process you can all follow as well here. Okay. Let's go to the income statement. Okay. And I'll look at the bottom and I see that we went from minus 4.8 million to minus 8 million here. So we basically, and then we get down to the bottom with tax benefits, we're still about $2.5 million in the hole. So we need to figure out what's happened. First place you can all look would be to look up on top for revenue. Okay. And you'll notice here the team has gone from 1.3 million in penalties to a bonus of 34. Now, a penalty comes from, I'll use my hand on the screen. A penalty comes from, excuse me, we promised up here and we performed down here. So by not hitting our promises, we exceeded them. When we get a bonus, we've exceeded them. So if you look at this, you see our revenue has dropped from 30 million to 20.8. So we've given up 10 million, and we only saved 1.3 million. Now, what this tells us, and you can go back into sales and look at it. Okay, I'll jump into sales here real quick. And if you go over to the decision log, at the beginning, it was 95% for all three customers. And now we've gone we've left Gigamart at 95. And then the other two, we've dropped to 90%. And if I look at the customers, you'll see that not only did Gigamart exceed it, Buns and Braids did too. Chic Fantastique came in under that also. So what ended up happening is by going to a lower on-time promise, even though we performed pretty well, except for the last one, fundamentally what happened here is the team dropped the promise so much that they got hit with, a $10 million drop in revenue. And you can calculate your revenue by looking at the percentage change of the contract index, because that'll give you a sense of what percentage you lost in revenue. So excuse me, what this tells me looking at it is we gave up 10 million to save 1.3. So if this team made no other decisions and went back towards 95%, two of the three customers, they wouldn't have had to give up any revenue at all by lowering the promise. And we came really close to Chic Fantastique. So we got to rebalance this decisions here. So that gets them a long way towards being profitable. That's what happened here. Other things you can look at is, we dropped $6 million in material costs. And so what I'm curious there is a couple things. Did we drop a product that we would ship to the customer? So let's go over to the decision logs. Okay. And in fact, that's part of their revenue drops also, is they dropped products there. So if we come back and look at finance again, we have to rethink a little bit what we just said. Excuse me, I'm getting kind of a Charlie horse in the voice here. So we saved roughly 6.3 million in material purchases, and we got 1.3 million saved in bonuses now. So combined, we saved about 8.1 million, but we still gave up 9.886 million in revenue. So we're still a little out of balance, and we have to re-question, should we have dropped that product now that we see that or not? Okay. And then, of course, because we're building less, there's a little bit less in the mixer cost, so that's a little bit more that we save a little bit, and we save a little bit elsewhere. If I continue going down here, the two I want to refer to, what's happened here is this is isolated to this team. Other teams may have done it. But what I saw across many teams here is the emergency loan and the bank penalties. Okay, their bank penalties are 4.4 million here. And so I'll explain that in a second. But what's happening here is we are paying a penalty to the bank because we did not meet our current ratio promise to the customer. And what I mean by that is if I go back up to finance now and I look at the decision log, and you'll see right here, my current ratio promised to the bank was and current ratio, if you remember, is current assets divided by current liabilities. We promised the bank we will have 1.35. In other words, I'll have $1.35 in assets for every dollar of liabilities. If we go down to the working capital on the bottom left, and this is part of the learning, so don't beat yourself up, you'll see this always brings over how we performed last round. We only hit 0.91. So we promised the bank, and the loan they gave us is based on, we said we would aim for $1.35 in assets for every dollar of liabilities. We ended up at 0.91. We only have 91 cents in assets for every dollar of liabilities. And so that's a much weaker position. And so the bank is saying, well, you're going to pay a penalty for breaking or for not meeting that covenant. And the penalty, to go back to the income statement, the penalty is going to be 4.4 million. So what everybody should look at here, now here's the deal too. If you exceed your promise, there is no bonus in the bank penalties. But if you come up short, there is a penalty. So it always makes sense to stay conservative and promise what you know you can hit and then move it up from there. But if this team fixes this one, they get 4.4 million back. And all of a sudden they go from, you lost 1 million up on top in revenue. You got another loss of 4.4 million here. That's a $5.4 million reversal. And all of a sudden, they're within $1 million of being profitable. Okay. Now, the other one to look at is going to be the emergency loan. And what the emergency loan does, in this case, they did better, but part of it is, well, I can't speculate, but let me explain it to you. Emergency loans come in because you don't have enough cash. Okay. You don't have enough working capital. So you cannot go bankrupt in the simulation here. So you borrow from your shareholders at 28% interest. So what a number here means, let me take 70. Well, let's bring up the calculator here while we're here. I'll do it on the screen here. So this is for 6 months. So if I take 77,722, I'm going to divide it by oops, where's my division? Divide it by 0.28, because the 77,000 is the revenue. So, or the expense, excuse me, the interest expense. So if I take what is it, 28% of, that means I had to borrow almost $278,000 for 6 months to have enough working capital to run the business. And if I multiply it by 2, that means my total loan is about almost 555,000 a year. But if I fix the other things I'm running into, then I didn't have to give that cash out. Okay, I didn't have to lose the money. So anything where I'm losing money or giving cash back in penalties, I'm having to borrow an emergency loan. So if I fix those problems, then my emergency loans go away. So it kind of comes with the conversation. So, really what in this case here, these are the things this team would look at. For your team, here's what I would tell you to look at. The bonus or penalties up on top here, as well as did you give up too much in revenue for what you gained back in bonus and penalties? I'd look at that. I would look at your materials. Are we spending too much? Are there other suppliers we should work with? Flexible labor is overtime. We pay double. So we should look either at staffing or am I making too much at one time? If I come down here to overflow, now the reason this team has got a lot of overflows, they dropped a lot of products, but overflow means I don't have enough space in my warehouse. And is that because I sized it incorrectly? Or, did I bring in too much at one time of a product or a component? Um, or or did I, in this case, I didn't make enough, but overflow is like extra space, and we pay about 4 times as much for overflow space. So overflow is always good to look at. And then kind of coming down to the bottom here, um, not only do we have the emergency loans, but we have long-term and short-term interest we're paying. They didn't change much here, but you'll see it down the road as you improve the business, you'll pay off your emergency loans first, and then you start working on the short-term loans, and then you start cleaning up the long-term loans as you increase the business. And a lot of that's driven by the bank penalties down here, which we talked about. When we pay off our loans here, we pay off emergency loans first, short-term loans second, long-term loans are done typically third. So part of the goal is to improve the business enough so that our cash flow is better, our working capital needs are not as much, or they're positive, and then we get rid of things like, we're able to make our promises go up. So this kind of gives you a sense. Other places I would look at too is I would go back up into sales, look at the customer finance, and you're looking for things like you'll see here. We've got some overdue payments. So we're not getting paid by the customer fast enough or they're late paying. So we have to look at that. Okay. And you may not have those decisions right away, but we should still keep that in mind. If I'm going to purchasing, okay, I'm going to go to supplier finance. I currently don't have any overdue postponement payments or frequency of overdue payments. So we want to keep an eye out on that because order postponement is a big one. That means the customer, or excuse me, the supplier's on credit hold. But if we look down below, we're really not bumping up against anybody's credit limit here. But that's something to keep an eye on. Another one also to keep an eye out for is the components. Let's go to supply chain actually for this one. I'm going to go to the component report. We have delivery reliability, this first column, and component availability. Component availability means at the time of production, are the components available to build with? And if you think about it, if I'm missing one component, I can't build. So the goal is to get component availability up to 100%. Now, 99.8 or above is basically the same thing. So how do I get components available? I can get the suppliers more on time. If you look at this first column, it's pretty hard to have components available 100% of the time when suppliers are only at 90%. So we need to look at that. Now, do we get suppliers more on time? Maybe we carry some more safety stock, might be a possibility. So we want to make sure we're also keeping an eye out because this is all about cash flow and working capital, balancing supply and demand. How do we get the money in like we're supposed to get it in from the customers? We got to make sure we're not getting hung up by our suppliers being put on hold or being, or we're on credit hold with suppliers possibly. And we want to get our delivery reliability up. So those are the main things I would look at as we're going here. If I go to the bottling line, again, we got some overtime here, not bad. We liked, production plan adherence is saying, did we hit the schedule? This is saying we hit the schedule 88% of the time. Well, that's easy to do when components are in on time and we're not hung out, and on credit hold with suppliers or anything. And we've got our our factory properly staffed with people. Warehousing, if we look at it again, you'll notice here, lots of capacity, very little usage in space in both component and finished goods, probably because we dropped some products, so we didn't need to bring as many components in. So you would keep an eye on that. But even with low usage, we've got some overflow in both of them. That's typically happening probably right here, even though this is hours, but around day 40 in the finished goods warehouse, a whole bunch of stuff might have come in at one time, which we didn't have enough staffing for. So all of a sudden we got to be thinking about, hey, are we getting too big a lot in at one time? And even over here in about day 30, what day is that? Day 39 and day 28, huge inflows of raw materials. So even though we got plenty of space, if you look over here on the right, we had to use some flexible manpower, FTEs, full-time equivalent. So we had to bring in some extra people. So maybe we're okay on staffing, but we're getting these spikes for some reason. So maybe we go to smaller lots more often. These are the kind of things that we'd be looking at. Okay. So I'll get those done tomorrow or early Saturday morning. I promise I'm trying to race ahead and get all the grading done and everything else and all the other stuff. And that's my commitment I got to keep. But I wanted to get this to you. So as you're working on it over the weekend in your teams, you've got some things to reflect back on and start thinking about how all of this stuff hangs together. So hopefully that gives you some insight, and don't hesitate to text me like a couple of folks have done already, just to make sure they're getting what they need for their groups in time. Don't want to hold you back. So we want to make sure we'll keep an eye out for that stuff too. Okay. So I'll get this out to y'all.